So since this little channel is pretty much of an experiment, I want to try something a little different here today. If you've been watching any of these videos so far, you may know that I don't identify as MAGA. I don't identify as a Democrat or a liberal or a progressive or even a moderate. In fact, I don't really identify as much of anything because I find that, at least for me, all those identities tend to kind of hem me in and make me smaller in how I see things and in how I experience life. But I've been noticing more and more as I wade a little bit deeper into the political world, just how polarized we are and how damn sure we are that one side is right and my side is right and your side is wrong, and there's nothing I have to learn from you, and progress here would be just if all the rest of you on that other side would smarten up and start thinking a lot more like me. And that just isn't how things look to me, and I want to try to have a different kind of conversation. So I want to start here today, perhaps to start a new conversation, just by saying, what are some ways that I agree with MAGA, with the followers of MAGA? So one way and one thing that I see and I agree with is this deep-seated feeling that there's something wrong in our country, that things somehow aren't fair, they aren't right, they aren't working the way common sense says that they should be or we would like them to. So I think that's a healthy thing to bring forward. I think we don't start solving problems until we really come face to face with the fact that there are problems. And so I congratulate and honor the followers of MAGA who are saying that there's something wrong in our country, something that, or maybe a lot of things, a web of things that don't feel right, and we're going to speak up about that. So that's one way that I agree with the followers of MAGA. Another way is that I agree that there is a tremendous amount of waste and fraud and silly spending in ways that we invest massive amounts of money in our culture and in our government in things that really don't work. I'll tell you a story from my own experience. I worked in an organization in Vermont that was getting large federal grants to try to improve the lives of people with addictions and people in recovery and people in marginalized communities. And this organization was and has been making a series of videos trying to help to address these things and bring information that would bring more inclusivity and more awareness to these issues. And I was working in another part of the organization that was doing direct services. I was not involved in these in the production of these training videos. And one day, because of these were my colleagues, I decided I would look at these videos. And so I looked at a handful of them, and I was kind of horrified at it was a bunch of sort of rehashed woke words and phrases and ideologies that, in my opinion, did nothing real to help anyone and kind of further polarized us. And I was just kind of horrified because I thought, I don't know anybody in my life, and I know a lot of people, but I don't know anybody, not one person in my life that I would recommend these videos to. So all this government money was being put to use to make videos which in my mind were pretty much worthless. And I tried to bring this up somewhat delicately at first with my co-workers, and I said, I just don't see what's new in this. I don't see what we're contributing to the conversation. And they didn't really like hearing that much. And eventually I was asked to leave the organization. And so an organization that was about diversity and hearing other people's viewpoints and coming to common ground on things and including everyone. When I expressed a diverse opinion, I was asked to leave the organization. So I agree that there's waste, and this wasn't necessarily fraud, but it was just misuse of funds in ways that didn't feel productive. So I agree that this feeling that there's a lot of what our government does and our culture does that isn't particularly useful. So I agree with you about that. I also agree that there is a kind of, I don't know, all the words are tricky, but there is a kind of elite group or culture in our society that is kind of deciding what's right and what's wrong, what's right about racial issues, what's right about gay and lesbian issues, what's right about about the terminology that we use to describe people of color and gay and lesbian people. And this is a kind of, even though it's not really coming from anybody who's actually on top, the people who are pushing these theories have a kind of self-righteous, this is the right way to include our fellow human beings in our society. And we're going to make these kind of unwritten rules, and sometimes written rules, that this is the way we need to talk to people, about people. This is even the way we need to feel about people, or about policies, or about politics, or about situations. And I agree, there's something off-putting, there's something annoying about that, about being told what you should believe, as though you're a school child and you need to be taught the right way to think and the right way to feel and the right way to talk and the right way to be with your neighbors. And you're not supposed to say things that don't align with this language or this ideology. I agree. Some of these ideologies I even kind of agree with, about inclusiveness. But the way that they're talked about, the way people are talked down to, the way these things are kind of jammed down our throats, I agree. That's not helpful. Sometimes it's obnoxious. Sometimes it feels arrogant. So I agree with you about that. I agree that these things are very tricky to talk about, because in my opinion, there's wisdom and there's confusion on both sides. And part of why I want to make this video, and I may make a series of them, but is that I think it's time to begin to hear the things that we have to say to each other, even in conversations that are very emotionally charged and where people have very strong feelings about what's right and what's wrong and what's acceptable and what's not. So with that preface, I think it's a risky business, and I don't think it's terribly effective, to try to solve our racial divides and to uplift certain communities by making other communities smaller. Specifically, I think I agree with, we may have disagreements about this, but I agree that this whole, in order to include people who have been historically not included, or oppressed, or kicked out, or had violence done to them, black people, gay people, immigrants, you name it, in order to include them, we as the dominant white culture need to make ourselves smaller somehow. We need to feel ashamed of ourselves. We need to feel guilty. We need to be very, very careful that we don't say the wrong word to the wrong person. And I don't think that's what really brings about reunion, reconnection among groups of human beings that have been separated by cultural and political means. I don't think that's what happens. I don't think that's how it happens. I think it's a movement of the heart where people find a connection with someone that they have felt different from, and this brings about a change. So I agree that this notion that nobody comes right out and says it, of course, but this notion that every oppressed group is right and just and deserves to feel the way they do, and white people are wrong and don't deserve to feel the way they feel. That's not a healthy, and in my opinion, not an accurate description of reality. So I agree with that. We may have differences or discussions to have about the nature of white privilege, oppression of blacks and every other marginalized group in our country. But I agree that there's something in this notion that in order for one group to be uplifted, the other needs to become smaller and smaller and smaller. I agree with that. For me, this is played out when I was in prison. I did have white privilege. I was allowed to do things that the black and Spanish people, and that's how it's said in prison, so forgive me if that's politically incorrect, but there were things that I could get away with that the black and Spanish people could not get away with. I could speak back to guards. I could speak up about things. I could say that something didn't feel right to me. I could even get angry at guards and officers, and I did. And I was able to get away with it in ways that black and other people were not allowed to. But the way that I use that is not to get so small and say, I'm so sorry that I have these privileges and that you don't. I said, okay, if I have this privilege, I'm damn well going to use it. One day, I was working on an outside landscaping crew in prison, and the inside officers decided to send out a bunch of people from my unit who'd never worked with power equipment, chainsaws, lawnmowers, weed whackers, any of those things. And they decided to send them all out to the outside landscaping crew. No training, no nothing whatsoever. And then they were mad at these guys because they didn't work, because they didn't know how to use these tools. They hadn't learned what it meant to use a ride-on mower or a weed whacker, let alone a chainsaw or any of the power tools that we were expected to use. So the guards got mad at these guys, and they were all black, and I stepped in and I said, look, I said to the guards, no, you're not doing that. You are not blaming these guys. And I was speaking to the guards, not as a convict to guards, but as one white man to other white men. I said, no, you are not going to blame these guys because you guys aren't doing your effing job. You want people to come out here and work, you damn well need to buckle down and you need to train people how to use these tools. And you need to stop, I don't remember what word I used, but it wasn't a good one, so I won't say it here. You need to stop grousing about them and punishing them for what they're not doing right when you haven't trained them to do the job yourself. So that, to me, was using white privilege. If there's white privilege, let's stand up. Let's utilize it. Let's put it to good use. I liken it to, if I had an SUV and somebody was stuck in the ditch, call me in my SUV, I have privilege. So I come up, if I go up to the person who's stuck in the ditch and I say, oh, I'm so sorry you're stuck in the ditch. I feel really bad that you're stuck in the ditch. And then I drive off. That's, to me, how white privilege is being applied now. To me, a righteous use of white privilege would be to stop, take out your chain, help people out of the ditch. Let's go on together. So I agree with some of what I hear from MAGA people, that this whole every oppressed, again, this is not exactly how it's said, but it is kind of how it feels. Every oppressed group is good and justified in everything they do, and every white person or white group is bad and racist and wrong and all of this. It's not that simple. So I could go on for a long time here, but I just want to say that to the people, to the MAGA people, I don't identify as a MAGA follower myself, and I don't expect that I ever would. I have real respect and I have real resonance with some of the things that you're saying. And I appreciate the fact that you're saying them. And I appreciate the fact that you're calling attention to things that aren't right and that aren't as simple as some on the left try to make them. It's not as, racial issues are far more complex than just there's a good side and there's a bad side and we're on the good side and you're on the bad side. Nothing is that simple, or very few things are that simple. So I may make some more of these videos, but I wanted to start, what prompts me to start this is I feel like right now there is so much saying on either polarity of this, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm not going to change my mind. The only resolution of this situation is if you start feeling more like I do and start agreeing with me, then we can have a conversation. It doesn't work that way. And I wanted to start this by saying, I feel like there is wisdom, there is important experience, there are messages of value that are coming from MAGA and that are coming from the left as well. I wanted to start this, maybe it'll be a series of videos, I don't know. But I wanted to start this by saying thank you to the MAGA followers who are pointing things out that are not easy for people on the left to hear, that may not fit into the perfectly neat, tidy boxes of how things are, quote, supposed to be. Good for you. Speak up and let's begin to listen to each other in different ways. And maybe we can begin to have a conversation that includes the wisdom that all of us bring to the table. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like this or if you don't like this, let me know. And I may do one about things I appreciate about what the left, the progressives, the liberals, the Democrats, whatever you want to call them, what they're bringing to the table. And then I may do a couple more videos about where I think, I wanted to start where I think people are bringing wisdom to the table. Maybe some of the next videos would be where I think we're kind of all a little wacky. We're all kind of crazy on both sides of this. So thanks for listening. Please, if you have comments, please feel free to leave them, write them. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. I hope to see you again soon.